engaging and working with Indigenous First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. Today, there are approximately 200,000 Indigenous people in British Columbia. They include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. There are 198 distinct First Nations in BC, each with their own unique traditions and history. Over 60% of children and youth in BC's foster care system today are of Indigenous descent. There is a necessary focus on ensuring that children in care who are of Indigenous heritage establish connections to their communities. Here are a few facts about the history that has led to the overrepresentation of Indigenous children in BC's foster care system. Beginning in the mid-1800s until 1996, over 150,000 Aboriginal children were removed from their families and communities to attend residential schools. The residential schools were an extensive schooling system created by the Canadian government and administered by churches with two main objectives. Indigenous children receive an education in Christian beliefs, and Indigenous children were expected to assimilate into the dominant or mainstream society. Residential schools forcibly separated children from their families for extended periods of time, and children were forbidden to acknowledge their Indigenous heritage and culture or speak their own languages. Children endured severe punishment if rules were broken and endured horrific abuse. Residential schools undermined Indigenous culture across Canada and disrupted families for generations, contributing to a general loss of language, knowledge, and culture. Beginning in the 1960s, the federal government handed over the responsibility for Indigenous health, welfare, and educational services to the provinces. These responsibilities included the 60s Scoop, a time in Canadian history in which thousands of Indigenous children were removed from birth families and placed for adoption in non-Indigenous environments both here and abroad. The impact of the effect of the residential schools and the 60s Scoop was devastating to the Indigenous people's cultural systems. Children lost connection to their families and supportive communities, their language, foods, and the spiritual practices of their ancestors. The families fell into despair, many of them turning to alcohol. Alcohol was once used by fur traders as exchange for furs and was now a way to pass the time and deal with their grief. The communities of adults that remained lost the children who they would teach the traditional knowledge and practices to. They were left without purpose, unable to go about their lives as they once had. They were left without the freedom to use the lands and habitats that had been so critical to their survival. The legacy of the residential school left generations of children who had lost parental involvement in their intellectual, cultural, and spiritual development, and who were abused and abandoned by a dominant society that did not recognize or honor Indigenous rights, land, or traditions. As a result of the abuse suffered by the First Nations peoples, survivors and their children have experienced intergenerational trauma. Policies and standards. BC's child welfare policies reinforce the rights and the needs of every Indigenous child and youth to be connected to their communities. As a foster caregiver, this is your mandate and responsibility when you have children of Indigenous heritage in your home. The Child, Family and Community Service Act, the Aboriginal Operational and Practice Standard Indicators, and the Aboriginal Policy and Practice Framework in British Columbia Provincial Child Welfare Policies mandate engagement with Indigenous communities and recognize engagement with communities to be in the child's best interest. Through community connections and relationships and learning about traditional teachings and family history, foster caregivers and the children's social worker help to create a sense of belonging. This will help develop a relationship based upon mutual trust and respect and provides motivation to live with a minimum of friction and maximum of goodwill. The foster caregiver's role is to support the child to learn and practice the child's Indigenous traditions, customs, and language, and to belong to the child's Indigenous community. These relationships are a key component in planning for children and youth in foster care and are reflected in all parts of the care plan that guides foster caregivers and social workers in providing the best possible care for the child and youth. More and more we realize that relationship is central to the health, happiness, confidence, and well-being of children and youth in care, and whether we are foster parents, caregivers, or social workers, we have a strong and important role to play in ensuring the children and young people in our care have a positive sense of family and community, feel valued and safe, and have a assured sense of place and belonging. First, you must understand a few things. In order to successfully support an Indigenous child or youth in your home, you must provide a culturally safe environment, an environment that is spiritually, socially, and emotionally safe, as well as physically safe. Cultural safety encompasses an awareness of history, an understanding of its effects on generations of Indigenous people, and applying that knowledge through demonstrated action. Cultural safety is ensuring that the unique needs of Indigenous children and youth in care are recognized when planning, implementing, and providing care. Is there a care plan in place? Is it being followed? Are connections to the child's family and community being made? Cultural safety includes the voices of the children and youth we serve. Who are they? And how can we honor their desires, needs, and best interests with regard to their heritage? Cultural safety aims to create spaces where there is equity and equality for all individuals, set children up for success, find avenues to access the information, tools, and contacts they will need in the future. Cultural safety honors and trusts another community rather than imposing a governing practice. The family, including extended family, is recognized as the experts in caring for their children. Explore together and support children in discovering and becoming familiar with their cultural roots. Promoting a child's cultural norms and values helps to develop their self-esteem and cultural identity. Find ways to incorporate a child's cultural traditions, customs, and events into the everyday life of your whole family. Self-awareness is critical in doing this important work. You must become aware of your own values, assumptions, and biases. This awareness is necessary to understand how we act, react, and behave in response to those who are different from us. Connecting with Indigenous communities. Establishing connections or relationships with family and other community members related to the children in your care can be challenging, but it is critically important that these connections be made. Your child's social worker should have contact information that you can use to establish your connections with the Indigenous community related to the child or youth in your care. If your child's worker doesn't have the information readily available, make a plan with the worker about how to establish contact with the community members. Your child's worker should be able to guide you through the protocols to establish the initial contacts that will benefit the child or youth in your care. No training will provide all the specifics about every Indigenous community. You and your child's worker must plan together to ensure that your child's need for family and extended family relationships are made and can be maintained. These connections will also benefit your own practice as a caregiver as you gain more experience and become more culturally proficient. This will be of benefit to children who are placed with you in the future. Friendship centers may be helpful in identifying elders or others that may be from your child's community who can assist you with learning some of the traditional teachings and family histories. When establishing community connections, understand there is a diversity among Indigenous communities in their traditions and values. Though some will share similarities, the protocols, which are the rules of behavior used by people to show respect to one another, when working with people from different backgrounds in a respectful manner will vary depending on the community you are in. As you gain knowledge of these protocols, it will assist you in approaching and engaging in respectful ways with communities and families. As your child or youth becomes more connected with their community members, they may gain a deeper interest in the traditions. Many cultural activities require a traditional teacher in order to understand the meaning behind the traditions, activities, and rituals of the community. As the child or youth in your care learns more of their family history or gains a sense of belonging, this may lead to the development of important friendships. As foster caregivers working with a child or youth social worker in the development of the child's care plan, these experiences will help in creating a care plan that is both realistic and achievable. If there is an adoption plan made for the child or youth that is in your home, you may feel that adoption is something that you want to pursue. You must understand that there are placement priorities and that regardless of your knowledge of a child's culture, your home may not be chosen as a permanent placement for a child or youth. How to practice inclusive care in your foster home. Inclusive care is about keeping children safe, connected, and loved. It is about forming relationships which develop and change as birth parents and foster parents work together to care for the child. The focus is in the best interest of the child, and the goal is preserving family ties. In order to begin to integrate inclusive care and Indigenous cultural competencies in your home, ask questions. Your interest will promote self-esteem and pride in their heritage. Prepare foods that the child or youth is familiar with and introduce foods that the child's community is or would be sustained by. Choose books and movies that portray positive images. Participate in community events and celebrations. Check with your local friendship centers or Métis organizations. Learn what events they have that could include not only your foster child, but everyone in the home. Look for positive role models for children and youth in your care. Local elders can help you with this. Promote a positive sense of identity by acknowledging the importance of what your child or youth is learning. Understand that culture is part of your daily life that must include food, spirituality, art, activity, conversation, and stories as you walk this path with the child in your home. Always insist that family members be courteous when speaking about different cultures and practices that you are integrating into your home. Be an example of how to learn new ideas and model curiosity and open-mindedness. Some people may be fearful of new things. Be encouraging and foster openness for the benefit of the children in your care. Always remember that anything you do can assist children in care to develop a strong sense of self and identity.